Okay, the wiring is complete and almost ready for the boot cowl. Thought I'd just take a minute and go over a few more things and show you that. This is, if you've got the modular panel, the new panel that's set up for the G5, this is in Dropbox. You can print it off as the supplement, modular panel supplement, and it has a lot of the information about this new panel design. This is the original G3X manual, executive glass manual, and there are some things that are not in, that really there's some things that you need to know that are not in either one of these if you've got the modular panel. This is and I've gone over them in my forum thread that I keep right there, and it goes over each of these changes. I actually listed, I think there was 11 or 12 things you need to know between this and this that aren't covered here or need a little bit of enlightening on. This is the wiring chart that I talk about. There is a copy updated August 9th of this year. It's again, it's an Excel spreadsheet, which is kind of cool. When you open it, it will go to an Excel program. If you're looking for a specific wire, you can do a Control F and put the wire number in, and it'll actually take you in here to where it goes. But you probably won't need that because it's pretty self-explanatory. Like we said before, left header, right header, through the firewall and so forth. So it's 6 pages, actually it's the 7th page now. I actually have those 11 or 12 things that you need to know between these two at the back of this. This wiring chart will work for the new modular panel with these 10 or 12 changes that I go over that need to be changed. But still, you can still use this wiring chart to do that. This is the wiring chart from the one I'm currently working on, Old Glory. And you can see what I do is pretty much as I install a wire, I highlight it so it shows that it's been installed. If you come across a wire here, you need to do like here, black wire from the stall horn on the left header panel. It tells you that this is going to go to this wire, which is in the wing from the stall warning. So it will not be connected yet, obviously, since we don't have a wing up there. These two are in the left header panel. You see they're not highlighted because, again, those are going to go to the wing lights. So anyway, go through here, make sure you either have an explanation like this as to why it's not hooked up yet, and if it's not, and if it's supposed to go somewhere, like the stall warning, the circuit breaker, or then and if you don't have it highlighted, then go make sure that it isn't in this pack of wire somewhere and you've left one end out. So it does have every wire. I can assure you this is, I think, airplane number 4 or 3 that I've wired with the chart. So it's been checked and checked. Again, what I do for wires that go through the firewall, like these here, obviously they're not connected yet, but I want to make sure they're there and going through the firewall. So I actually check the wires and then I check them off in a different colored marker to be sure that they're there. That should not have been highlighted yet because it hasn't been installed. But I can see here that they are all there. What I do is when you wire, this one is pretty much ready for the boot cowl. The only other thing I'm going to go ahead and do now, which I think is easier, I'm going to go ahead and put all the different cables for the prop. I'm going to put the prop and the throttle cable through, and these are going to be the different cables that we'll use for the different heaters and defrosters and cabin heat and so forth. So when you got it on here, you'll see that we've got it all bundled up, nicely. Like I talked about before, I'll try to put everywhere I've got connections. Remember, we're going to have access under here. We can remove the G3X panel and come in easily through here. So if we leave this area, nice and open, and anything we think we might access, give us a good way. Like here, you can see I can easily take that out and come back here and access these, or I can come from underneath still and access them, good. These are the wires that are going through. These little brown wires are actually all your probe, EGT and CHT probe wires that are going to go through the firewall, which is going to be right here. And these wires are going through the firewall. So I've actually put them together. I put a little piece of green tape around them, like I have everything going through the firewall to remind me that it's going through the firewall. And then what I've actually done is I've gone down and looked at the wire numbers, and I've compared them to the chart to be sure they are all here. I haven't left something up in here, or maybe something got left off, which is highly improbable in the wiring harness. So just check them off, make sure they're there, and then once they're all there, you know they're there, then you just want to have them. You see how I've made them where they're kind of free and away from the rest of the wire bundles like this, so they're easily out of the way and accessible, and can move around to go through the firewall wherever that hole is that it's going to go through the firewall. You know it's going to roughly be in this area somewhere. Same thing with these wires. This is the wires that we had to actually go back in and install ourselves into the connector for that GEA unit. This is going to connect to the fuel pressure transducer, which will be on the other side of the firewall. So we'll install it. It has wires come out. These will go through the firewall. We'll connect these to those wires, and that'll give us our fuel pressure reading. This bunch of wires, some of them are going to the alternator, these little bunch here, and then these couple here are going to the fuel pump, which will be there. Okay, this is the manifold pressure line. Again, you see how I've kept it completely separate in a way. I haven't bundled it with any bundles of wires anywhere. And the reason is so it can move around a little bit, plus to make sure it doesn't get pinched. It's a very soft hose, so it can be pinched quite easily. If it gets pinched, you're not going to get correct manifold pressure readings. Okay, so everything is connected. That's going to go not through the firewall, but as I discussed in the other video, the firewall will have a fitting here, a nipple fitting here. It will go onto that nipple and clamped, and then on the other side of the firewall, then we'll connect a different hose over to the manifold pressure fitting on the engine. That again brings the air in. It's going to the transducer here that's going to measure the manifold pressure. This is built into the wiring harness again, and I discussed it earlier, but I'll show you how I've made this so it's easy to get to. I did not secured it with a screw and a bolt. I put the 8L clamp around it, secure the 8L clamp together, then put a tie wrap around the fuselage tube there, and then again up here further, and it's just as solid as anything else. Okay, and it can easily be accessed from this side by simply clipping the tie wraps and pulling it down and checking or replacing that, as well as we talked about the nut plates that I used on the brackets, so that they can simply easily from the inside there, we can unscrew them and take them out. You'll see here we talked about, you see here we've got, this is the right ignition, the other one is the left ignition. This is A and this is B. And as I talked about, we connect these are going through the firewall, so we'll clamp shell, excuse me, right here. On the end of these, each one of these, I have clearly labeled it RA or RB, LA, LB, so forth. So you'll have that ready to go, and we'll actually bundle this together, go through the clamshell. We'll actually put some friction tape around here to protect it where it goes through the clamshell. I'll actually do the same thing on all these. I'll go ahead and put a little bit, even though the razors are going through rubber grommets, I'll still put a wrap of friction tape there too. The clamshell that this goes through in the firewall is not a rubber grommet, it's actually metal, so you want to make sure and get 2 or 3 good wraps around it where it goes through so it doesn't get hurt. All the places I took my fuel lines now, I just had them loosely there. We're always wanting kind of a downhill, so this is the fuel line going here, and it goes up higher on here. Of course, then it goes on up. So what I've done now is I've gone ahead and secured it. So here we've got a downhill to here. You know, we've got it to here. I went ahead and put some friction tape, and then you loosely tie wrap it with your protective piece inside. It's going downhill over to here. I went ahead and put a loose tie wrap there to hold it, make sure I was keeping my downhill to here. Then you can see how it's going on over here. We've got a couple of more that we're going to put right here, standoffs, but we need to get that interior panel up first, because we're going to see it actually has cutouts for that to go into. So I'm not going to actually do these standoffs until I get ready to fit the interior panels later and find out exactly where that's going to go. Everything you can see I've tried to do, you can see how I wired it. I've tried to bundle it so that any of the connections and so forth are easily accessible, either through coming through here or coming underneath. If you have wires everywhere, you can see I can get to these connectors, I can take them loose. I can get to these connectors. Here's some connectors. this is the wigwag box. You'll see in some photos where they've got it sitting on top of the tube. That was okay on the 340 carbureted engine, or yeah, the 340 engine. But with this one, with the EX3, which doesn't have anything to do with the engine, this has something to do with the EX3 and the defroster. The boot cowl on the EX3 has a defroster unit. You remember if you built it already, which you should have. It comes across here, and that actually comes down, almost touches this tube. So you really can't have that setting up here. So go ahead and put it over to the side a little bit like this, and ignore any pictures you see where it's up on top. So you want to keep this area here clear for that defroster piece to come across. Same thing here, you know, all my neutrals, my grounds are all tightened up. I'll go ahead and torque seal those here when I'm completely done. All my connectors here you see are accessible, coming in from the G3X side. Same thing here. Here's all the lighting connectors right here. Here's the connector going to the Adahars unit. Here's this tubing here, the back one, the aft one goes out and splits. That's your static air lines, which goes that way. Then it comes across this way. I just leave them a little long. Later when the boot cowl comes in, we'll cut these to fit and mount them to the fittings that will go through for the static air. Then we've got the green one, which is for the angle of attack for the pitot tube. If you've got the 26 pitot tube that has an angle of attack, which you probably do. So that's what the green tube is for. Then the outside one, or the forward one, is going to be the blue tube, which is the actual we'll install to the pitot tube. Again, you want to do this loosely. You don't want to crimp this down. You just want to hold it in place. It can come across here, and then it's going to go here. And I'm not going to secure much here because I'm going to put the wrap it and around it stuff, you know, the black stuff is going to come around through here later, and then I'll secure it. So right now I've just got this taped up in place. But right before we install the boot cowl, you know, that'll be put on. This all comes up, I just keep it together so it's about the right lengths. Again, as I said before, this is your flap handle. This is going to connect over here to the flap rod, which is going to go from here all the way back and connect to your flaps. And then so when you pull the lever, it'll activate the flaps, and it actually moves depending on where you have the flaps. So I don't do every time I've tried to figure out where this wire goes and really secure it good now, I've always had to remove it later after I put the flap rod in to make sure I had clearance. So for right now, I've just got a couple of zip ties in here just holding it. This is real stiff wiring here where all the A&R stuff is. So just push it up in there and get it out of the way for now. Again, this back wire here is going to connect. It'll be a ground wire later from all this harness here. It'll connect when you install your window frames. It'll ground out to one of the screws and nuts there. Coming up into this panel here, you know, on both sides of the wing roots, these are going to be your wires that are eventually just going to connect with your wing. When your wing comes in, you've got the wires that you left in your wing, remember? And it's going to come out here right by the strut attach fitting, so it doesn't have to be long. It's going to attach right here. This again is going to do the same thing. It's going to attach to the, hopefully you got these in your left wing that comes from your pitot tube. It'll already be out. Then we're just going to cut them and connect them right here, so you really don't need much length there. And this is going to be your outside temperature probe. It's just going to turn and go right here in the front edge of the leading edge here. That first little panel that we're going to put in is going to stick, you know, down right there. We'll drill a hole. So that's plenty of wire for it. And I've taped the screws onto that we'll end up using. And that's going to be a ground wire we use. We'll go over that later in the forum post. Up here again, you're just kind of checking everything. You're going to check your wire. You should have a wire going to every side, to everything that you've got up here, okay? So this is your power bus like we talked about. Anything with the copper strip is where the power comes in. So you can see we've got a wire going up there. So that's obviously should be bringing power. And then the back side is going to whatever that particular circuit breaker is for, okay? I've talked before about this switch here. When you put the trim switch in, you should be the handwritten 2-1 should go on the top, not any pre-printed stuff. Okay, so that's that side. When we come over here, what I do is I just make sure anywhere I've got a wire, I want them secured so they're not flopping around or moving around as you move the aircraft. So here some of these wires were actually too short to run way out and around and come back in. You had to cut across. So when I do, I make sure it's not going to rub on anything. So I get them up in the air, and then I secure them like that. Same thing here. I don't like too many tie wraps, because if you ever have to get into them, you got a bunch of stuff in a cramped space you're going to have to fool with. So just kind of pull them together, keep them where they're not sticking on anything. Also make sure you haven't gotten any of them where they're too tight, so that when you crimp them down, don't pull them so tight you're stressing any of the connections. You can see here, this is where on this modular panel, it's made to stick a G5 in here. So you can just stick the G5 in here. This is the power bar already for the power bus, to add another circuit breaker in there along with these right here. And you can see here the connectors. We guys make sure, same thing, you should have a wire connecting every one of these circuit breakers and switches. And we traced the power before. I showed you how the power runs to the power buses and so forth. But here you can just kind of see how I've bundled the wiring, up everywhere. It's really firm. I don't have it attached to the fuselage really anywhere at this point, so it's just holding itself up. Same thing here. I'm just making sure here I actually attached this, because it came around this side, because it went here, and then it came over to these fittings right here to went into the Adahar's connectors. So here I just kind of wrapped it with some friction tape, and I secured it down here to keep it away. I don't want it on the edge of that metal hitting and rubbing, as the aircraft moves around. Wiggle everything around, make sure that nothing's loose, and just wiggling around. That if it does wiggle or vibrate, it's not going to rub on something and chafe the wire or whatever. We talked before about this is the landing light switch. This is the #1 switch that should be, or a spade plug that should be left undone. You will not be using it, and the one you're going to plug in is this white wire. It's going in the right center over here. That's kind of not defined very well. I kind of leave my antennas kind of separate. You can kind of see I leave them outside like that. Again, look, that tube is loose and free. It's not bundled up with anything that's in there. That's the transponder. You can see the transponder antenna connections there. Okay, you got your comm antenna that's here. We've got these that are coming out here, come back around here. These are actual mini sensors. Same thing I said, I've got right and left written on those. Those are going to go also through the firewall over there. It will be used, and we need to know which one's right and which one's left. See how we've done this, the copper tubing. This is just how we've gone over all this already, so I'm just kind of showing you how I bundled everything up. You see how it's bundled here, nice and neat. It's out of the way, so it's not rubbing on anything anywhere. And I don't put zip ties usually across here to the tubing, your panels. You can see here to the felt, where the interior panel is going to go across here, so you don't want to interfere, have that sticking around inside the panel. It wouldn't hurt, but still I'd rather have it sitting around the felt there. So it goes all the way down. This is to your IBBS battery. The fuse is going up to this battery like that. And I've zip tied a little zip tie right there, which should help be sure that these are secured good and will stay there, okay, because they're just simply slide-on spade connectors. So the likelihood of both of them pulling loose is not too good if you've got it zip tied there. Coming all the way up here. And again, same thing, we've got our antennas all coming up through here. On this side, you've got the cockpit lighting wiring, and this, you notice I just kind of left it loose. Again, I'm going to wait until I get this flap rod in here, and I'm going to see how all this fits best around that flap rod, and then I'll secure it after I get the wing on. All these wires going to the back, I've just kind of bundled up here later. Like I said, this was what I was talking about before. Some of these are in your kit. I think they're black, but you can pull the back off. You can stick them up somewhere like that, and then you can take your wires like that, and then the zip tie wrap will go through there, so you can just put them through here, and zip tie them together and hold them up or down or wherever. But like I say, you're not going to know where that's going to go until you really get that flap rod in there. And again, you can see how I've protected this going around this corner here. I've bundled them up and some of the around it in here too. And then here's our magnetometer wire. It's going to come off the back. And then over here, we've come across here. These are our two antennas for our XM and our GPS for our GX3. This is going to go, this is okay up on top like this, because we're actually going to have some shims where the turtle deck and the skylight meet. So it's going to be up off of here. So you've got room. These are not going to have anything sitting on them. So you can leave them up top like that. Where these go through, they've got some black shims that are going to go underneath here. That'll hold it off of that, so you don't have to worry about bringing them to the back or whatever. And your skylight's going to be above this area here. Just make sure when you mount these, you got yourself plenty of room to mount your seat belt up here, because your seat belt reels, inertia reels go up there. And you can see here, we took these and I put wrapped friction tape and then tie wrapped them. Your turtle deck sits up on top of this, and we'll go forward, so you see you've got plenty of room here. You're not going to be worried about that on top. And I just put them on top because then you won't see them from the inside. Your turtle deck will be on top, and they'll pretty much be out of sight. And then they'll go connect to your turtle deck, where you'll have your antenna, your combo antenna. If you've got that combo antenna, you'll have two connects, one for GPS and one for communication, or one for satellite and one for communications. Okay, so that's how that's wired there. Up here you can see we just got, this is our positive and our negative wire coming back up. This was coming from the auxiliary, which is your plug right there. So this is coming attached earlier when we were testing. I had it attached to the positive, and that's going to be your negative. Later your battery box will go in there. You can see here the autopilot is set up. This is a roll. Everything on this side is set up, pins in, everything's good. And right now we just got this loosely installed over here, because later after we adjust all the ailerons and center the sticks up and do everything, then we'll make our final adjustments with this little torque tube and this here, so that when we get full range of motion, this little arm will go between these areas here. So you can see, looking down, the master solenoid and the starter solenoid. Then the ground lug, I guess, is right there. Is the ground lug, where all the ground wires are. And then here I've actually taped on here this is the actual rivet that will be used when after we adjust this, install it, we'll tighten it down, and we'll actually go underneath and drill a hole and install the rivet. So I don't put the battery box in now or anything, leave it like this. You're still going to be doing a lot of work through here later when you get through with the autopilot systems in there. You do it at that time. So here on the inside where they come down, I usually try to run all the wires together. I guess one went one way, one went the other, but it's no big deal. And just kind of get those together and keep them from moving around. Some are coming, remember, through here, coming out. And the same thing, just kind of make them so that they're away from everything. They're not going to, be loose. This is the starter wire that's coming back up. It'll go out through the firewall as well. Same thing, on this side, we've got everything coming down, bundled up nicely, going through the floorboard there. As we spin it over here, nice thing about the fuselage, spin it up. I'll make a point, just something came up, somebody else was asking the other day, and I say it when you're building it, but this is one of the differences in the EX3, and I understand that not all of them had that. I'm gonna get my light over here a little better. But not all of them had this pulley in here. The EX2 chassis did not have this pulley here, which is our cable coming from our front stick. Okay, and so for it, this is the bolts coming down from the blocks that's holding the torque tube. For there, we had a fair lead bracket that came out, and we ran this through around fair lead to got it. I put in the forum post that you don't need that fair lead. I understand that maybe some of the fuselages did not have this piece with this pulley on it. I had serial number 2 fuselage, and it did have it, so I'm not sure why you wouldn't have it, but that's what they told me. So just make sure that you've got this pulley. If you've got this pulley where that cable is coming from the front stick, it's coming up to the top of this pulley, then it's working its way back through. It'll actually be connected to this autopilot here for your pitch. Cable goes on back, goes to the back of the rear stick, which there is a fair lead in it. This is a rear stick coming down. Then it will go right on back and go to the back of the airplane. So looking underneath here, same thing. Here we brought all of our wires this way. I try not to run anything around here, because later your belly pan is going to go on here, and then your boot cowl is actually going to go on and fit over this here. So in this case over here, I had to use one. I just had to pull this in and get these wires back up because this wire is so stiff, this starter wire. So I put one there, and just to make sure I held it, but later it's kind of a pain to work with because your belly, your boot cowl will come across here, and then your belly pan, I forget, one goes over the other. I think the belly pan is going underneath the boot cowl, so you'll have to slide it up in there, and we'll have to drill holes and put nut plates there. While I've got this thing turned and easily on a rotator, I use my soldering iron, and this is a kind of a fun one because it's also a butane. So it's a soldering iron, but it's butane. And so you can turn it on, and for all your holes where your belly pan is going to go, you burn those out. Make sure you burn them out because they're already threaded. If you try to just punch a hole through them and then start threading it, you'll probably gum up the threads, and it won't work good. So in any case, I was just telling you about that right there. Looking underneath here, then this is our cable. I kind of route, you can see I route the cable. Everything's going to kind of go to this side, because here we got a wire that we got another one of that's the ELT battery or ELT cable that's going up to the ELT. It was coming through here, going up there, and going outside that hole there. And it will have a grommet on it on the other side. And these come down through here. Then to make sure we're not interfering with any pulley or anything, then I put something here and I tie wrap these all to keep that all here and out of the way of any of the cables and pulleys. Same here, this wire here that came in has to cross over this way. So it came down, so I brought it down, kept it stiff and out of the way, attached it here to keep it out of the way. Again, this is going to be your antenna wire that's going to connect to the transponder, little fin antenna. It's going to go on the bottom of your belly pan. Later, when I actually install it, which is about one of the last things you do in the airplane, then I'll actually fit it to it, and then I'll actually probably put another zip tie somewhere over here to hold any of the slack out and keep it from moving. And then you see here that's the trim box over here. This is going to be the front connector for where your front stick is going to connect. And I just make sure you don't need much, just a little bit sticking out on that side because the stick itself has got a long connector cable. I don't worry about the grommet right now because later we're actually going to have to run the brake line up through this grommet too. So we'll just leave it loose, run the brake line through it later, and then we'll attach that one. The other brake line will go, through here later. Anyway, you can see here's all the grounds going into here. See how I put everything together. Here, I'll just bundle it up nice and neat. If you need to take some loose, unconnect them, then route them around better, do that. Keep them all out of the way. This was the fuse holder. There's methyl chrylite. After I got done, I just squared a bunch of methyl chrylite, glue it down there. I pushed this down into it, and I put a bunch of weight bags on here just to hold it down overnight till it got hard. So you can see here, everything has got the boots on them and the covers. And this is the rear autopilot, and I go over that in pretty good detail in the forum, how to install it. And that's out of the way there. Okay, so this is the line going back through the rear. This is going to be the rear stick connections for the trim. So it'll go through here. Same thing here. I'm just making sure everything here is out of the way of these cables. See, this from these autopilot. This is the autopilot servo here. This is the autopilot servo here. Bring all those wires in. Keep them back away from this cable so they'll never touch it. They're not rubbing on anything. Come back across here. And I'll make the final adjustment on this one. I may have to move it a little bit either way because I want that cable to be dead center in this center slot here, but I won't know till I put the tension on all the gauges that are there. So that's pretty much it. So check it out and let me know if you got any questions about it. Hopefully yours goes as good as this one.